Thank you everyone for joining in today afternoon. And this is one of the first inter-stakeholder discussion that we are having. It is, I believe, the right time and the right place where we started thinking about sustainable construction as a mainstream space. And this cannot be done by individual professionals who are working in just their own spaces. It has to be a multi-stakeholder dialogue through which we can take it forward. So I have been, Inisha, take me to the next slide, please. So I've been very lucky to kind of get into the space where we started off with all about architecture as a platform, which is organizing the event. We are an AI-driven digital community for grid building architecture. And our aim is to act or work with different multi-stakeholders like business houses, students, professionals, or conscious citizens who want to work in the sustainable sector, who need to have information, who are looking forward to improve their skills, and who are trying to figure out how to kind of take in the challenge which they are being faced up with. Next slide, please. And for this particular program, we got some really good and amazing partners with us, where Apeksha Nagia, she is here with me. She is the director, MD Private Limited, architect Neelam Manjunath. She is a founder and managing trustee for CGBT and Manasaram. She is an amazing architect who works with very local materials and to its core try to give them shape and a kind of place in our society. Then we have Shulti Kurukshetra, who is she has her own law firm, and she has very nicely shifted towards ESG as a part of her offering, not only for real estate but for the wider communities. So that in context, we get into the next segment where I would like to start off with our day's panel discussion. And next slide, please. Yeah. So before we go in, it's business Ray, or reuse, recycle, repeat, and kind of the space that we are trying to talk about. This is a three-pronged program where the panel discussion is on today is a 21st is a panel discussion. It has three parts. And in the three parts, in the first segment, we would be speaking with a professor from IIT Roorkee and agency from called Griha, rating agency called Griha, which is working in the real estate sector for a pretty long time to understand whether the real estate needs sustainability or sustainability is actually the need of the community or not. In the second round or the second panel discussion, what we would be having is a round of discussion where we speak to understand what challenges professionals or businesses are facing when they are moving towards creating the space. So we would be speaking to designers, we would be speaking to consultant and a developer house to understand the challenges when they're trying to move into creating the sustainable spaces. And in the third round, which is one of the most interesting one, we would be talking about the aids which are really available right now in the market. We have a very big panel up there. And in that space, we will be having someone from investor background, from Agility Ventures. We have someone from IGBC who is working from Green Pro. We have some representation from JLL, a professor, an ex-professor from CEPT, Mr. Hemantwala, and also a service provider from EcoColab, which is working in this space. And in between what all this happens, we would be asking, we'll be sharing a small link in the chat where you would be able to say what sustainability means for you. It is like a word cloud, it's like a word cloud diagram, which we are kind of collecting from all speakers, all people whom we are interacting with to understand what sustainability actually means for them. So that is, it would be really great if you kind of look into the space and kind of respond to that. And yeah, let's start off with the next round. This rounds, we'll be trying to conclude the entire thing between 45 minutes. You can always have your questions. My co-hosts Ediksha and Apeksha would be taking care of the questions which we can take in after the discussions with the panelists. So, Ediksha, would you please take into the next slide? So, starting off, yeah. This is the segment right now which we are going to talk about is sustainable construction and necessity. This question is being raised because whenever we try to, whoever is in the real estate sector would know, whenever we try to talk about sustainability, it becomes very difficult to have a conversation around it because people generally believe like there are many forces which put an inertia to the challenge to move towards sustainable construction. However, I have done a small two-slide setting before we move into the discussions with the panelists. Ediksha, the next slide, please. Where you would see, like, from international reports, we do find a substantial space of carbon emission from the sustainable, from the construction industry. And in the next slide, if you take me, Ediksha, we would see India as a market. It has a huge potential to grow, where in the construction field, we see only 5% of the total built space as on date is in the green building sector. So there seems some kind of I would say, a mismatch between how we are building and what needs to be built. So that in mind, we move into the next slide where I introduce my panelists, and we can start off with Mr. Akash from Kriha and Mr. Professor Ablokika to kind of join me for the discussion. So, yes, please stop the presentation. Thank you. Thank you for joining it, and I hope we have a good discussion right now. So before we kind of go into the space, like I have been trying to set down the background in the context of what sustainable construction is really needed for us or not. What I would like to understand from your side is what is the impact of the present day construction in the ecosystem? Like I can, if Ms. Ablokita, from your perspective, if you like to kind of have that in point, please, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Right. So you're talking about the impact of construction, the contemporary construction technologies, Sayari. So I think this whole premise is very well set. There is, I think the discussion is on how much impact or, how much of, so how much impact and what type of impacts, what scale of impact is what we are talking about. I think the world largely is convinced that the contemporary construction materials, they have tremendous environmental impact. And also what majority of the times we are kind of focused on environmental impact. So there is pollution, there is a lot of carbon emission and a lot of greenhouse gases emitted during the construction. There is a lot of energy that's going in. So all these are environmental impacts, which largely we talk about and are concerned about. I think to me, another major impact, which we are currently not talking, is the social impact. So, from New York to London to New Delhi to Shanghai, everywhere we are using concrete, we are using glass, and the kind of architecture we get in all these places is the same. We are losing the identity. Where is the identity? Our cities looked very different. Today, if we go to the old city part of any city, you go to Kashi or you go to Jaipur or you go to Madurai, we see a different palette of materials being used, and these were the materials which were available in the locality vicinity. So besides being sustainable from environmental point of view, they also had an identity which is an integral part of social sustainability that we're talking about. So right now I'm in Ladakh, and when Ladakh was open for tourism almost close to 1.5 decades back, at that time it was an untouched territory. Now there was identity which Ladakh carried through its architecture. It reflected through its architecture. Now when you come back here, a lot of tourists are coming and people are coming in, you are only staying in the replica of traditional architecture. And majority of the places, even the traditional architecture is kind of gone. The elements are gone, the materials are totally gone, and all in the name of fast construction and sometimes structural stability. So I think what we often tend to focus on today is environmental sustainability. A lot of work is being done and more is required to be done. But I think we should also simultaneously look at the social aspect of it, and also bring to the center of our discussion the existing materials, also from a policy perspective. Because see, through a lot of rating programs and through government guidelines, we're talking about sourcing, I would say what the materials which are available in the close proximity, but then the distances that we mentioned for that close proximity and the definitions for those are quite lenient, honestly. So we really need to look at what is specifically available in this area, what would be sustainable, both environmentally, socially, and together it would be economically in the long term. And then, take forward that discussion simultaneously. So to me, the social impacts today are quite serious, which we are not looking at, but we really need to look at that side too, besides the environmental impacts, which are widely known, researched, and well established. So
Thank
that's
you
what
so
my point.
much for that. And I think that leads very rightly to speaking with Akashdeep from Priha, which also acts as a very well established rating agency in India. So I would also like to kind of understand from your perspective the same question. Like, you work with multi stakeholders and you work with government agencies. How and what do you see the impact, and what is it about, like from the construction industry? Yeah.
Thanks, Harry, and hello, everyone. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. A very and nice point which is made by Ms. Ablokita as well. We have lost our architecture as such. That is one of the challenge. And I myself, being an architect, it's very sad to see that our architecture has evolved to just copy pasting the Western culture without seeing the ill effect of the glass buildings, the fast track construction. Somehow it seems that when we were local, we were sustainable. The moment we have become global, we have lost sustainability, not just in construction, in our lifestyle as well. Whether it's food habits, whether it's staying habits. So if you see Indian culture, it was rising with the sun, sleeping with the sun. That was sustainable. Why do you need a light? Obviously, yes. And it's not saying that go back to the Stone Age, but then that was sustainable lifestyle. You see your clothes, very simply put, that was passed to generation until unless they have been out of their life, and then also it goes into the whole carpet weaving and multiple use in our jugaad, so-called terminology of Indian jugaad. So sustainability is jugaad. Somehow the last 10-20 years, because of the Western impact on our psychology and on our beliefs and acceptance, we have lost that jugaad as stingy. Somehow it is linked to jugaad as stingy, which is not actually the case. So we have to come up that actually jugaad is sustainable and stingy is sustainable, whether you accept it or not. Whether it is in terms of buildings material which we are using, we have to be stingy in all these resources, because it is not there at the end of the day. So it is not shying away saying that I have a money to spend it. It is that we accepted that these resources are not available to us for a lifetime. And interestingly, as a rating body, what we have seen is, yes, there are very less percentage of this acceptance into the market, what is actually green. The challenge what has been created for us is basically the misconcept behind sustainability. Putting up systems and getting a rating, that is not the case. The best thing about Indian, if you see the whole tropical belt which we are located is, you will very hardly find any developed country in that belt. It's all underdeveloped and developing countries. But interestingly, we all ate There's some innovation. I'm getting some echo. I'm not sure from where. 1 second.
No, it should be. It was. That's it.
Okay. Now it's fine. So what we were saying is that people should understand that one, sustainability is not costly. That is a challenge which we have created for ourselves because we take wrong decisions at wrong time. Obviously, once you say, first I want lots of glass, then you say heat gain has happened, so put a higher tonnage of AC. Then you put because of lots of glare coming in, put a curtain on the glass. Whole concept of glass is gone. Then it's easier to make a box building and sit inside, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is putting on curtains and putting on lights. So first of all, we have to understand that sustainability is common sense. It's no rocket science. It's very basic. It's very simple, but we have to be acceptance to common sense. Basically, we have to be open to local, as Avalokita ma'am was also saying, that we have to be open to local solutions. Sustainability is all local. Sustainability is all very cost effective. When you are saying I'm reducing my I'm integrating daylighting, I'm integrating cross ventilation, I'm using local materials. The point is, how the cost increases is not how will it increase. If you are reducing on everything, it cannot increase. And that is where, if you are going ahead for high-end systems, the cost increases without thinking of why you need it. Nowadays, if you go and ask what is green buildings to anyone, it's I have renewable energy on my roof, without seeing whether you have reduced your demand. Okay, I'm using my electricity lavishly, so I put 100 kilowatt on my roof and I become green. That is not the case. Reduce your demands. Obviously, once you reduce your demands, you have saved some energy. You have reduced your sizing of electricity, lighting equipments. You have reduced your air conditioning load by optimum use of window and glass. Then what cost you save, you invest in solar. So if you do a logical thinking in the whole process of designing, sustainability cannot be costly as a whole, and sustainability cannot be something which is an extra effort. One of the challenges we have faced is this has to start with the architectural community, because design is the key. And I myself, as an architect, it's sad to say that we do not follow architecture which is sustainable. Basically, we give away on clients' demand, which we should not, because we need to make them understand what they are asking is not feasible. They want to make New York in India, it is not possible. We are in desert area, we are in hot and dry climate. You cannot build a New York in hot and dry climate, basically. So
that directly actually takes me to the next question, which was, so I feel your pain. Being an architect, I also feel helpless in this situation. And it's helpless because I also struggle to understand what would be the different roles of the stakeholders. Like an architect, as a professional, we are part of the ecosystem that has been created. We are also part of the entire channel of different professionals, businesses, individuals who are working in this space. So though we understand how and what should be the roles of the different stakeholders, if Ms. Avalokita would like to kind of speak about it.
Yeah, Professor. So before I go about that, I just want to take forward what Akash was mentioning about the cost. So what's actually happening right now is that because of I would put it very bluntly, because of our kind of following the Western systems, we have become so obsessed with certain materials, like I say, cement and concrete, that we, as a society at large, I'm saying all of us are at fault, we think that this is the standard. Okay, concrete is the standard, and there is nothing that would replace concrete. And a very classic example of that, we went to Spiti, and there is a monastery which is more than 1,000 years old, and it's all rammed earth, adobe construction that survived the earthquake, while majority of the contemporary constructions, which were done using brick and frame structure of concrete, they failed. Plus, the people now realized that the buildings which they were doing earlier with rammed earth and adobe blocks were far more thermally comfortable than these buildings. there is, so now gradually, because of all this mindset, what has happened, and in majority of the areas, is that the skilled craftsmen, they are totally wiped out. They're dying out. The traditional skills and arts of construction and those of using the local material is not there. The local material is there, it will still be cheaper, but the skilled craftsmen, the artisans, they are not there. Now, who will work? People don't know how to do adobe blocks and rammed earth in those areas. So while we say that yes, it is cost effective, but when it comes to the labor part, it becomes extremely difficult to find the right kind of labor within that budget. And then our capex increases. So we start thinking that, oh, this is costly. While at the end of it, so here, what you were asking me was, so where the roles of different
Yeah.
stakeholders come, that is where the government's role will come. For example, we already have schemes like Manrega. Okay, now we can actually initiate programs where instead of going for, say, concrete blocks or AAC blocks, we can actually generate an absolutely sustainable way of living. We need to kind of instill that pride through such advertisements, through such campaigns, where we start feeling that, no, this is the right thing, and what we've been doing for the past uh, post 1990s, it is actually post liberalization that we saw all this, fast paced economic growth and, this development happening. It wasn't there as much earlier. So we really need to look at the pre-liberalization practices and also instill a sense of pride in how it was happening and how it is actually the way to sustain the future. Because I was reading the report, a report where it very clearly mentions, I think it was from one of the economic forums discussions, that the world is together collectively moving towards a decline in economic growth. And there will not be as much economic growth as we are seeing today. It is going to initially kind of stagnate, and then it's going to decline. Now, in those times, which the world is looking ahead, we will actually be looking for the basic necessity fulfillment, and that can only come through a holistic sustainable living, of which the sustainable buildings are a part. Now, one more point I will add here, and then I'll close, is that these rating programs currently which we have across the world, so they have certain criteria system, but then it is largely, most of the rating programs are largely driven or based upon what is designed and how building is intended to perform. While a leap in that, is when we are talking about net zero buildings. So the moment we actually are talking about, I'm not saying net zero energy or net zero water, but the moment we say it's net zero, you're not taking from the grid, you're not taking from the municipality, and you're managing everything on your own. Automatically, there is no need for measurement and verifications. It has to demonstrate, it has to perform. So I think when we move to that level, there will be a substantial jump towards adoption of such practices, and then there will be a greater drive, is what my feeling is. Yeah, I'll stop here.
No, it's all right. And no, it's the thing is, I think 3 hours is too small a time to have these conversations. But we have just started, is what I can say. So I am sorry for the small time, but I can also feel maybe we'll not be able to take up all the questions. But I just lead this same question to again Akashdeep. What do you think the different stakeholders' role would be? And like Professor Alokita has set down the premise about the role of the government, the role of the different stakeholders and the communication. Please share your point as well. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. And thanks for putting up the context, Alokita ji. Now, interestingly, when you talk about stakeholders, sustainability, and built environment, we all are stakeholders at the end of the day, whether it's a 1 year old born or a 80 years old person. At the end of the day, we all are the one who are using the resources. We all are interacting. We all have the needs. So we all are the stakeholders. Now, what we have seen is once you are, and that's a general psychological practice, when once you are above 40, it's hard for us to learn new skills, basically, even above 30. So seeing the 2070 targets which our government has set, which and anyways the future of the environment is with the future generation. One of the major stakeholders which we all should target is the younger generation. Education needs to have sustainability in their curriculum, and this is somewhere what we have also been trying to work with both NCERT at school levels, CBSE boards, and at college levels also, that once we come into the industry, it's very hard for everyone to learn and grasp these new topics and these new things, because that is not taught to us in our life, in our school curriculum or college curriculum as well. It has been touched on some architectural curriculums in bits and bits, but sustainability as basics to the concepts is never taught to us. Somehow it was thought that we have inherited it, but somehow we have lost it. So it is important that it goes into the basics of our school curriculum for the school students, because that's where you put these seeds in, and at the end, once they, whatever they become. Now, what happens is, if you ask a lawyer, he wants a lavish house with glass windows opening to a good scenery. He doesn't understand sustainability at the end of the day. Whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a businessman, they don't understand sustainability because they have not been taught. We have not been taught, as simple as that. So school curriculum becomes very important. That is one area, very interesting area, which Griha deals with. There's a interesting evaluation system that's called the Griha Day Schools. It's not there across the globe. So just on that side. Now this rating, especially when you say about, it's not taken by any consultant or architects or anything. It is taken by students for their own schools with their teachers. The intent of this exercise is again to make them understand what sustainability is. So we do not have any other further stakeholders involved in this whole process. The students from 7th to 10th are involved in the whole evaluation process. They are made to say, okay, go to your different classes, see how much area you have, how much fans you have installed, how much light you have, light bulbs you have installed. So that basics through activity is something which is taught in this rating. So it's come basically play and learn for them to understand sustainability at that stakeholder. Similarly, at college level, you have various activities which we do with, especially architecture engineering colleges, in which, for example, when you talk about light, now how much is ample? As a user, this light is okay, this light is less, this light is more. It's just a feeling. But officially, everything can be measured. As we said, if you can measure things, you can manage. As you rightly were saying, that net zero. And one of the concepts which Griha was developed was what gets measured gets managed, because in India, data is one of the challenge. Unless you don't have data, you cannot manage it. Whether it's human resource, whether it's energy, water, light, anything, everything can be measured in its effectiveness or efficiencies, basically. So with college students, we go around helping them understand these technical terms into much simplified ways. Then you have general public come into place. So there are multiple stakeholder engagement with them to make them understand what these topics are. There's something called Paryavaran Rakshak program which we do. Mr. Praveen, yeah. So in that, what we do is basically, it's a 2 hours Sunday games with them. That's all. In games with the residents, we try to make them understand these topics. So as I said, everybody is a stakeholder. We can't put everything on a government or everything on architects. It's not that way. It's a collective approach is important. And from a small kid to a 80-year-old, they have to understand their own responsibility, which is a challenge in our country, because nobody wants to take responsibility, whether it's us, whether it's government, whether it's schools teaching our students, our kids, whether it's officers having the profession. So important is to take responsibility of what we are doing at the end of the day. If we take that responsibility responsibly, probably sustainability is still possible. Otherwise, the way we are going, 5% of the whole built environment doesn't make an impact at the end of the day. Sari, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely, yes. And I completely agree with the fact that when we are speaking about having a like getting other people like citizens involved in the system, it means it also creates a demand. Unless and until there is a demand for certain things, we can keep on supplying, but it will not be taken up by anyone. So empowering people in all probability is also the way how we create the demand for the future projects that we are coming up with, the future sustainable aspects that we are thinking about. One question which kind of leads me to this is, while we see 5% as a number of green building, which is part of the entire built space, which is going to become a $1 trillion business space in by 2030, as reports suggest, where do we stand in respect to the rest of the world? Like, we always keep on saying India is sustainable because we are closer to the roots. I personally face a dichotomy because many of the time we see the cities, we, like India is a country of villages. Like, we are moving towards creating cities, and how would that change actually impact the moment we move into the space of creating cities? Or so how, where do we stand is my question to Professor Avlokita.
So I don't have these statistics, but you know, what you were saying is precisely the line of thought which I think all of us would have. So while we are comparing the numbers and we say that our per capita energy consumption is less, or our, you know, per capita resource consumption, whatever, is less, we also have to see that, you know, there is a majority of the population which is actually not consuming, you know, or are consuming hardly any resources at all. So with the growing, economic prosperity and, as you say, urbanization, more and more urbanization happening, the lifestyle is changing. We are bound to be more and more energy consuming in the time to come. So while currently the numbers might give us a perception that our overall per capita resource consumption is, you know, way lesser than the developed countries, and, you know, the consumption of overall Earth's resources and a lot of these statistics, but it is, it is changing very fast, and it is bound to change. And if we continue, so there are two things: either we drastically reduce the population that we have, so if we reduce the capita, so it still remains the same, or we reduce the resource consumption, either of the two. Now, we can choose, we can work on both of them simultaneously, but I think reducing resource consumption is easier. So I wouldn't really put statistics to it that where do we really stand, but we have to keep these two things in perspective, that we are a populous country, very large population. Yes, per capita consumption is less, but overall, and with the changing lifestyle, we might very well cross several countries as far as overall resource consumption is concerned. So we really have to be careful about that. So no numbers here, but yeah, that's the direction.
Yeah, Akash, back to you.
Yeah, rightly said. I think so. Now, if you see that whole per capita consumption which we have, 70 to 80% is from the cities. The moment everybody in our country start consuming the same, we'll be the lowest, I'll say highest consumer across the globe. So that is somewhere good for us, that we are in the roots and not developing our villages in the same way. But again, that's the ray of hope, that hopefully our villages still have the hold on our culture, and stick to that, rather than we bad people who have shifted from our culture towards the modern consumption patterns, modern living lifestyles, and turn towards unsustainable lifestyles, basically. So economic, again, you can talk about any resource which is energy, water being a challenge, and we have seen that we have made such cities in any topography which can be flooded. Chai desert le lijiye, chai you go on hill, you have Rishikesh and Nainital on Jammu got flooded. You have coastal regions, you have flooded. You have plateaus, the Maharashtra central area, Bangalore, Chennai, nowhere linked to the cities, but seas but flooded. So somewhere we have taken things for granted. I think so. That is one of the challenge which we have seen, and also with regards to one of the important thing, which governance is very important in this whole role. Our country or our states, the challenge is, if current state politics is doing somewhere relatively good, the next politician, whenever even the politics change, even if it is good, it will be stopped. So they don't have that mindful decision making in which what is right for the country or state. It is the bad politics which we have in our country, basically. There are many big examples of it, wastage of resources in those terms. Amravati capital complex, huge investments gone, but the change of government and everything got stopped. So not just on a lower scale, and that's where the higher levels need to understand that if something is good for the country or state, and it has to be taken forward rather than playing on the dirty politics which we generally used to run on. So again, right now it's not a rosy picture, but let's hope we improve somewhere on each of us improves, and 10% becomes 20 and 40 and 50, and probably have a better future. We will all be dead anyways by 2070. Let's hope our kids have a better future, because हमारे तक तो improve होने से रहा. That's for sure with the pace which we are going in.
Yeah, no, I know it was a difficult question, and I can feel the discomfort when we are talking about it. But you know what, I am positive about one thing, like what I personally see, construction in its phase or in its scale is something in India is maybe a 2 or 3 decade old phenomena. Like earlier, it was not this big. And and while we are talking about the prominent, I would say the houses of the Western world, they are having it from the Industrial Revolution, which is almost close to 100 years right now, or more than that, closer to that. Within the 20, 30 years decade, at least we are having conversations, we are having policies, we have started thinking about it. So we don't make a mistake and we start going back. In all probability, we would be learning and taking care of these steps while we are going ahead. Like that was what I would imagine. I think I'm an optimist to the core, so I would imagine it that way. But that is where I would take that point. And one thing which was touched upon in our conversation was, which stops people is the thought that it is a costly affair. So both in terms from, I would like to hear from both Professor as well as Akashdeep, how do you think like the cost of the pricing is? And do you think with the demand, it would actually have, like all we see with all products, it may actually help in reducing the cost? Does the government help in kind of helping us having that like taking away the entry barrier so that the demand actually increases? Like a take on that for the cost on the sustainable constructions. And I think that would be the perfect end for the first slot that we have. Yeah. Professor, yeah.
Yeah, so see, I'm not a practicing architect, but
Right.
we work more on theoretical and research related things. So from whatever I've experienced, because if Akash, you are working in the practical field probably, or Apeksha or other people, you would be better people to tell about that. But what has been my understanding is that often people are not looking at the operational cost when they are making the building. So that is, so where sometimes the sustainable construction might prove to be, slightly costlier as far as capex is concerned, but it might actually get, paid back within a year or two if we include the operational costs. So majority of the times through my interactions, the research interactions, I found that people are not looking at operational costs, and which is what I've very clearly seen in the architecture across, and people are coming back to the traditional architecture. One, that. The second thing is that most of the materials which are required to create sustainable architecture, because it largely requires correct designing at the start of it, selection of the passive design strategies, where to put veranda, where to provide shading, which orientation to avoid for windows, what glass to take. Majority of the materials are already available in the market. Yes, some materials still require research, and of course, there is always a scope for improvement, betterment. But the knowledge and also the materials largely are existing. It is on us. How do we put them to use to actually create a sustainable building, which uh, initially might cost a little extra on capex, but in the long run, in the operations, would pay back. So, in my understanding, while I was, doing this a couple of these studies, most of the materials are the same. When we start to experiment, the glasses are there, the different types of bricks are there. Of course, innovation is happening, and here I would like to very quickly tell you that besides being a professor, we are also, I have been working on developing a brick, a slight modification to the CSEB, where we would probably not require any mortar cement at all, and it would still give us the thermal comfort, and it would not require any plastering, and it would be structurally stable. So that's the kind of innovation the world is doing, and that will go on. But all the know-how exists. We just need to have a very clear idea of how to implement and create a sustainable building. Our ancestors did that with even lesser advanced materials. We already have far more advanced materials for passive designing and for active strategies too. Both are there. The efficiencies will continue to improve, get better, but the design knowledge already exists and has existed since ages. We need to take cognizance of that and put that to implementation first, is what I believe.
Thank you so much for that, Akash, with your take on it, because you generally you are also hands-on working with your role that you are in. So you would be aware of the past and future expected way how we are seeing this ecosystem to grow.
Yes. So interestingly, as Professor Lokita mentioned, that life cycle analysis and costing is one of the important part. And it's interesting to see that, again, once you introduce such terms or evaluation methodology, India doesn't have the data for it, basically. So even being said that, we had tried in Griha and the newer versions to keep this into the whole evaluation process. So Griha newer version has LCCA and LCA evaluation as a requirement into the whole evaluation itself. So pushing the market to adopt to better tools which help them take an informed decision. A very good example, as mentioned previously also, the VE star label program. It is nothing more than an informed decision making tool. You know the star, you take the whole jab into it is less star, less energy, more energy, more star, less energy, basically. And it was easier for the general public to understand that whole jargon of energy efficiency. And we have seen the cost decrease drastically because of that. Similarly, the LED program, which was run by Power Ministries, BE itself. So on similar levels, you need that initiative, top-down approach or the bottoms-up approach, that to increase the demand. The demand will only increase once the people are aware. So you need to have tools which help people take an informed decision, which are simpler to understand for them, and have make them use this. When you talk about LCA, everybody runs away. I don't want to do an LCA. I don't have that cost sharing methodology. I don't have that data in India. So these jargons are good in terms of Western world's tools which are available to us. But at the end of the day, you need simpler programs which transcends the technical knowledge to a general public and help them take these decisions on a informed base. So that, because at the end of the day, as a user, you just compare cost without understanding, if you have basic understanding of energy, water saving, and all those things. But once you associate that total cost with some extra energy saving in the bills, as the BE Star Labeling program did, you end up giving them more benefits with an informed decision tools. So similarly, we need to work on the tools in water segments, the material segments, If you make a tool which gives you values, nobody understands what you value of material is at the end of the day. You have to tell them, okay, you make a wall of this and you end up saving on your air conditioning on this much cost, and you save it. So that is the transition of technical knowledge to a general perspective knowledge. That is which I think will increase the demands at the end of the day. And obviously, with increased demands, costs will come down. Renewable energy is one very good example, but at the end of the day, the whole embodied carbon in renewable energy is a whole different discussion altogether. But then it has showed a reduction in renewable energy cost because the demands have increased, whether it's a government policy, whether it's a rating mandate, whatever it might be. So, and somehow across the globe, the last decade has been energy. But the next decade, or I think so, we don't have that decade also, but the next requirement is water, because water is life. No water, energy is a comfort, water is life. And we are seeing that challenges now across our, not just in our country, across the globe. So water has been neglected for very long, even being the life source. Materials obviously correspond to the areas which you work in, and government has taken many initiatives to showcase local materials. For example, if you go into Maharashtra, and Maharashtra is one of the, and interestingly, bamboo, India is one of the second largest production of bamboo. But instead of us, many other small countries are using bamboos in construction, but not us on a large scale. So government of Maharashtra, and Maharashtra has a huge belt of so-called bamboo farmers. So what they've done is, if you go to Chandrapur area in Maharashtra, they have made a huge bamboo research facility, which is only of bamboo. So structural work, materials and flooring, everything is of bamboo. So government is trying to promote these sustainable technologies in ways possible. But again, it's small steps. So let's hope these small steps become bigger. Mud blocks, lime mortar, and as initially also mentioned by Lokita ma'am, that skilled labor is a challenge. So it's good that we want to do it, but at the end of the day, if you do not find any way to do it, you will end up using glass and brick and concrete, and you don't have any other option at the end of the day. So it's a collective approach. Again, re-emphasizing on my approach, sustainability is not possible just by client, just by architect, just by user. It is a collective approach which we all have to take together. If we say कि हमने government को बोल दिया, हमने rating bodies बना दी, it will never happen. We all have to come forward in adopting these new challenges and as we say, we have the highest population, which means we have the highest brain power. So if we cannot find a solution, nobody in the world can find a solution for this whole problem. So with cons, we have pros as well. Huge population gives us huge brain benefit as well. Let's hope we use that in a much better way.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I believe in like the conversations we having or creating networks is what is one of the ways how we can actually learn or access newer products or simpler tools which are there, which we can start towards creating more sustainable spaces. So we have just 7 more minutes before I go on speaking. I would like to understand if someone has any questions for the panelists. You can share your questions now. If not, we would like to conclude with the sessions. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. You can unmute yourself and ask the question if need be as well, or you can type it in the chat box. Okay, I think it's like for the starting part, I think most people are agreeing with the notion of what we talked about having sustainable spaces being a need and not just an alternative. And hopefully a discussion like this can help us move towards a space where we are actually not bogged down by the terminologies, the technical jargons which are there, which I also feel kind of at times limits individuals and I would say individuals from adopting newer changes. The moment it becomes more about technical points of say and right now I think the list is too huge, which is like it starts from net zero to carbon footprint calculation to I would imagine we talk about circular economy, and there are so many jargons up there. And in most cases, I think instead of understanding the crux of it, of what sustainability is, people get lost within the jargons and they are just struggling to figure out what to do with it. So, any last remarks from Akashdev? I think I'm not, or Professor, we can then conclude this session. Any concluding remarks for the session? Yeah.
Just one more thing which I wanted to add, but I couldn't, in between. One more thing which we really need to look at is strengthening our codes for the ease of adoption. What Akash you were mentioning. So ever since ECBC, kind of incorporated the alternate compliance using shading devices, and also when we mentioned that double glazing is something that we should go for, the world kind of seems to go after it. Why not we do that for roof shading, for wall shading, for other strategies as well? So I think policy through code is where we are easing the implementation of strategies. What you were saying, Akash, is one more thing that we need to add in this whole picture. Besides everyone being on the same boat, we also need to specifically address the codal provisions and the policy provisions. So that was my concluding remark. Sorry, in addition to what all we discussed. Yeah.
Yes, and Akashdeep, do you have any concluding remarks?
So yes, codes are very important, and I think so. The rating tools and the codes. One of the challenges which the codes faced across the country is we have lots of individual states which then have their own prioritization on the codes basically, and that's how ECBC has also been involved. It has been given to states to have their own adoption as well. Codes becomes very important in terms of not just having a singular code across the country, but state-wise or region-wise requirements needs to be specified rather than following a country-wide code, which becomes more important and more logical in terms of adoption and implementation as per the local requirements. There is a need of, again, some place where you have a knowledge bank basically, so that people do not run everything nowadays. Okay, everything nowadays is available online, but the challenge is the difference between knowledge and information is not there. We adopt information thinking that it is knowledge, but then there's a challenge. So a very basic example is the MyVent technology, which we use for construction. One of the worst thing to be used in our country, but still it is accepted by the government. It is accepted promoted by the developers. It has a time issue. It has a benefit in time, but then it is one of the worst thing to use it for affordable housing in our country with the climate which we use. So that's what we say. If you have a repository in terms of sustainability, it becomes easier for people to take an informed decision. So whether it's material library, localized material library. So if right now no state has that. I want to have a green building material, I go up on rating tools, IGBC, any rating tools. There's no state-wise that directly available. How do I know what, as a user in Madhya Pradesh, what tools, what materials are available for me to use? How do I know what technology is available in my state? That state authorities have to come up with such local data sets which are authenticated, validated, and have a credible information at the end of the day. So these tools will help us increase demands and probably increase the penetration of green movement in our country in much higher ways than we are trying. We need to go to the base, the children which we have, as mentioned previously, again reiterating that they have to be fed sustainability right now. Otherwise, it will be pretty late for them to come into the market and understand this and implement it. So that is, I think we will be able to do and achieve much more than we are doing right now with our future generations.
Thank you so much, Akashdeep. And I think we will be concluding this session on that note, on a hopeful note, because we are moving into the next discussion, which would be about the challenges which people are facing. So I think while we talk about understanding the need and understanding the rules and regulations which need to be created, we would also need to understand the challenges which we are facing from existing players. Like we have Nilam ma'am, we have Miss Binjan Aset, and we would be Nilam having Mr. Sunil Jain. He is also a developer house from developer house to kind of come in and talk about the challenges.